2 years after humanity's withdrawal and dramatic return, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Galactic Council still existed and still met in their grand chambers on Nexus Prime, but their authority had been forever diminished by the simple demonstration that their most effective protectors could function perfectly well without them. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through the rebuilt council chambers, noting the fundamental changes that had taken place. The human delegation now occupied a separate section of the hall, positioned not as subservient junior members, but as respected equals. More importantly, when human representatives spoke, every alien in the chamber listened with complete attention. Kikiu statistics told the remarkable story of transformation. Piracy in human-protected sectors had dropped by 78%. Slavery had been virtually eliminated in 3 major spiral arms of the galaxy. Civilian casualties from organized crime had fallen to their lowest levels in recorded galactic history. But raw numbers could not capture the fundamental shift in how humanity was perceived and treated. Captain Katie Brooks represented the new generation of human Space Force officers. Unlike their predecessors who had struggled for basic respect while serving under alien oversight, Brooks and her peers operated with the quiet confidence of a species that had proven its worth and established its complete independence from alien authority. During her weekly briefing with Admiral Patterson, Brooks reported that the Vegan system government was requesting human assistance with a terrorist organization that had been attacking civilian targets. The significant detail was that they were not making their request through council channels, but directly to human military command. This had become the new standard operating procedure across the galaxy. Alien governments increasingly bypassed council bureaucracy entirely to request human aid directly, knowing they would receive immediate response rather than months of diplomatic debate and committee meetings. Dr. Maria Santos had transformed her research institute into the galaxy's undisputed medical authority. Alien species now sent their brightest students and most promising researchers to learn from human methods and techniques. Her latest breakthrough, a universal trauma treatment protocol that could save lives regardless of species, was being implemented by medical teams across 43 different worlds, without any council oversight or approval required. The philosophical transformation was perhaps even more significant than the practical changes. Humanity's withdrawal had forced every alien species to confront an uncomfortable truth about their relationship with human protectors. They had grown completely dependent on human sacrifice and effectiveness, while contributing very little themselves to galactic security and stability. The Zilonians, who had been among the most vocal critics of human military aggression, had completely restructured their entire defense doctrine to incorporate human-style rapid response principles. Their military commanders now studied human tactical manuals and tried to emulate the decisive action that they had once criticized as barbaric. The hegemony, historically focused on gradual diplomatic solutions to every problem, had created their first dedicated military intervention force. However, they still relied heavily on human advisors to make their new approach effective, acknowledging that decades of diplomatic tradition had left them unprepared for the realities of modern warfare. Even the isolationist Catherian collective, which had traditionally avoided involvement in galactic affairs, had begun contributing significant resources to human-led peacekeeping operations. They had learned that isolation was impossible when criminal organizations could strike anywhere without fear of effective retaliation. President Carter, now serving her second term, reflected on the dramatic transformation during a speech commemorating the 3rd anniversary of humanity's withdrawal from council authority. She told the assembled crowd of human and alien dignitaries that humans had not left galactic service to punish anyone or prove any political point. They had left because they were tired of being ashamed of their natural strengths and capabilities. For too many years, humans had tried to make themselves smaller and less effective to avoid offending alien sensibilities. They had allowed other species to criticize and limit their most successful methods while depending on those same methods for protection. Now humanity used their strength and expertise on their own terms, for causes they believed in and methods they knew worked. The galaxy could benefit from human capabilities, but only by accepting humanity as an equal partner, rather than a criticized subordinate. In the outer systems where slaver strongholds had once operated with impunity, converted monitoring stations now maintained constant vigilance under human command. Their crews watched for any signs of organized criminal activity, ready to respond with overwhelming force at the first indication of threats to innocent civilians. The message these stations broadcast was clear and unmistakable. Humanity would no longer ask permission to protect innocent life. They would no longer submit their methods to alien approval or oversight. Anyone who threatened peaceful civilians would face the full weight of human military response, regardless of political boundaries or diplomatic concerns. Admiral Patterson often shared this philosophy with new recruits joining human space forces. He told them that they were not the galaxy's police force in the traditional sense. They were not an army serving alien governments or their political interests. They were not servants seeking approval from alien authorities. They were humanity, operating according to human values and human judgment. They protected what mattered to them based on their own moral code. If that approach bothered any alien government or organization, those aliens were welcome to try stopping human operations. None ever attempted such interference, because the galaxy had learned a fundamental lesson about human nature. Humans were most dangerous not when they were angry or aggressive, but when they were calm and determined. The species that had walked away from galactic civilization rather than compromise their principles was not one that could be intimidated or controlled. The Galactic Council continued to meet and debate and pass resolutions about various galactic issues. But when real crisis struck, when innocent lives hung in the balance, when difficult decisions needed immediate action rather than lengthy committee discussions, the galaxy looked not to the grand chambers of Nexus Prime, but to humanity. They looked to the species that had learned the most important lesson in galactic politics. True power came not from seeking approval or acceptance from others, but from having the courage to act according to your own principles regardless of what others thought. Human ships patrolled trade routes that aliens could not protect. Human doctors cured diseases that alien medicine could not treat. Human soldiers fought battles that alien forces could not win. They did all of this not because they sought gratitude or recognition, but because they had finally learned to value their own judgment above alien opinion. The galaxy was safer, healthier, and more prosperous than it had been in centuries. Criminal organizations that had terrorized civilians for generations had been eliminated. Diseases that had killed millions were now treatable. Trade routes that had been too dangerous to use were now secure highways of commerce. All of this had been accomplished not through the careful diplomacy and consensus building that the Council preferred, but through the direct application of human capability guided by human conscience. The species that had once apologized for their effectiveness now embraced it completely. As Captain Brooks told her crew during a patrol of the Outer Rim, they represented something unique in galactic civilization. They were the guardians who asked for nothing in return, the protectors who served their own moral code rather than alien political interests, the force that had learned to value results over approval. The galaxy had tried to change humanity to fit alien preferences, and humanity had walked away rather than compromise their nature. In doing so, they had discovered their true strength and found their proper place in galactic civilization, not as criticized servants, but as respected protectors who operated by their own rules and answered to their own conscience. The liberation of Arcturus Prime became a story that would be told across the galaxy for generations. When the massive slaver fleet detected incoming human ships on their sensors, their commanders initially dismissed the threat. Surely a small group of vessels could not challenge their armada of over 200 warships that had been systematically capturing civilians for days. They learned their fatal mistake when Admiral Patterson's fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect battle formation and immediately opened fire. There were no warnings, no lengthy negotiations, no diplomatic protocols, just precise, overwhelming violence that tore through the slaver ships like a fusion torch cutting through thin metal. The human attack was unlike anything the criminals had ever faced. Each shot was perfectly aimed, each maneuver calculated for maximum damage. Within the first 10 minutes, 50 slaver vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors tried to flee, but human ships pursued them with relentless determination, hunting them down one by one across the star system. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the destroyer Defiant and led the boarding actions against captured slaver vessels. Her teams moved through enemy ships with mechanical precision, freeing terrified civilians while showing absolutely no mercy to their captors. When hegemony forces finally arrived 6 days later, they found the research station secure, all civilians safe, and the slaver fleet either destroyed or scattered to the far edges of space. But humanity's return to galactic affairs came with completely new rules. President Carter's address to the galaxy was broadcast from the rebuilt United Nations building on Earth, and her words reached every inhabited world in known space. She made humanity's new position absolutely clear to everyone listening. Carter told the galaxy that humans had tried playing by alien rules for 37 years. They had submitted to alien oversight, accepted constant criticism, and allowed other species to question their every decision, while human blood was spilled to keep alien civilians safe. She declared that era over forever. The new human doctrine, which became known as the Carter Policies, fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. Human forces would never again serve under alien command. They would never again require council approval for defensive operations. Most importantly, they would never again accept limitations on their methods when facing threats to innocent life. Fear. Transformation was immediate and dramatic. Director Neil Foster reopened the Human Research Institute, but with revolutionary new policies. Human medical advances would be shared freely with any species that wanted them. But the Galactic Council would have no oversight or control over human research. Alien medical authorities could accept human help or reject it, but they could not dictate how humans conducted their work. Dr. Maria Santos made this new approach clear when she announced her breakthrough treatment for the Catherian plague. The disease had been killing millions across 3 star systems, and alien medical teams had been unable to find a cure. Santos distributed her treatment to affected worlds immediately, without waiting for bureaucratic approval or alien oversight. Her decision saved over 200 million lives and established humanity as the galaxy's premier medical authority. The change was perhaps most visible in humanity's new approach to piracy and slavery. Captain Ben Torres, now commanding a military vessel again, led what became known as the Deep Hunt operations. These were relentless pursuits of criminal organizations that could last months and cross dozens of star systems. Where alien forces would stop their pursuit at territorial boundaries, human ships followed their prey wherever they ran. Torres explained the new philosophy to a confused Zolonian admiral who asked why humans did not respect territorial limits in their pursuit of criminals. Torres told him that humans no longer recognized territories when it came to protecting innocent life. They had responsibilities that transcended borders, and they would fulfill those responsibilities regardless of alien political concerns. The galaxy watched in fascination and growing respect as human forces systematically dismantled criminal networks that had operated with complete freedom for centuries. The notorious Black Fleet cartel, which had terrorized the Outer Rim for 50 years, was completely destroyed in 6 months of continuous operations by human hunter-killer groups. The criminals learned that the old rules no longer applied. Before the withdrawal, pirates could escape human pursuit by crossing into neutral space or hiding behind diplomatic immunity. Now human forces followed them everywhere, showing no regard for political boundaries when pursuing those who preyed on innocent civilians. But the real message of humanity's transformation came when the Galactic Council attempted to reassert oversight of human military operations. A formal resolution was proposed that would require humans to coordinate all military actions through council channels and submit to alien command structures. The response from President Carter was delivered by Admiral Patterson himself, standing before the full council assembly in the same chamber where Ambassador Morrison had announced humanity's withdrawal. Patterson's words were calm but carried the unmistakable weight of humanity's newfound independence. He told the assembled aliens that humanity served the innocent and defended the defenseless. If those goals aligned with alien interests, humans were happy to coordinate their efforts. But if alien goals conflicted with protecting innocent life, that was not humanity's problem anymore. The Admiral's meaning was crystal clear. Humans would work with aliens who shared their values, but they would never again subordinate themselves to alien authority. The days of humans seeking approval for their actions were over permanently. This new independence manifested in practical ways across the galaxy. When the mining colony on Vega Prime came under attack by raiders, they sent their distress call directly to human forces, rather than through council channels. The human response fleet arrived within hours and eliminated the threat completely. When a plague outbreak threatened to kill millions on 3 hegemony worlds, their government contacted human medical teams directly. Dr. Santos and her staff provided treatments and expertise immediately, saving countless lives without waiting for council authorization. The psychological impact on both humans and aliens was profound. Human military and civilian personnel operated with a confidence they had never possessed while serving under alien oversight. They made decisions based on their own judgment and moral principles rather than trying to satisfy alien political concerns. For aliens, the change was equally dramatic. Species that had criticized human methods for decades suddenly found themselves dependent on human protection and expertise. They could accept human help on human terms, or they could face threats alone. The choice was entirely theirs. President Carter summarized the new reality in a speech marking the first anniversary of humanity's return to galactic affairs. She told the assembled crowd of human and alien dignitaries that humans had not left to punish anyone. They had left because they were tired of being ashamed of their strength and effectiveness. Now they used that strength on their own terms, for causes they believed in. The galaxy could benefit from human capabilities, but only if they respected humanity's right to act according to their own conscience and judgment. The message was clear to everyone listening. Humanity had found its true power not through seeking alien approval, but through the courage to walk away when that approval came at the cost of their principles and effectiveness. 6 months after humanity walked away from galactic affairs, the universe was falling apart. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting on Nexus Prime, and representatives from across known space gathered in the Great Hall. But the empty seats where human delegates once sat served as a constant reminder of the crisis they faced. Prime Counselor Zephyron looked out at the assembled aliens with barely concealed desperation. The reports coming in from across the galaxy painted a picture of chaos that grew worse each day. Trade routes that had been safe for generations were now hunting grounds for pirates. The Sigma Corridor, once the busiest commercial pathway in the galaxy, had become so dangerous that shipping companies refused to use it. Entire star systems were going dark as slaver fleets moved through them like a plague. Without human intervention, forces to stop them, the criminals grew bolder and more organized. Intelligence reports suggested they were working together in ways that had never been seen before. The scattered raids of the past had been replaced by coordinated campaigns of destruction. Counselor Crixtal stood to address the assembly, but he was not the same arrogant alien who had criticized human methods 6 months earlier. His gray face showed the strain of leading a species under siege. The Zolonian outer colonies were reporting massive civilian casualties as raiders swept through system after system. Crixtal admitted something that would have been unthinkable before the human withdrawal. The human military doctrine of overwhelming response to aggression had seemed barbaric to his people. They had failed to understand that it worked as a deterrent. Pirates and slavers had avoided Zolonian space because they knew humans would chase them across the galaxy if necessary. Without that fear, the criminals had no reason to stay away. The statistics painted a horrifying picture. Civilian casualties in sectors that humans had once protected were up 400%. Piracy incidents had increased by 800%. Most terrifying of all, 3 separate slaver organizations were coordinating something called the Great Harvest, a systematic sweep through undefended systems to capture everything of value. Fleet Admiral Vexathera of the Hegemony tried to organize a joint response, but the task proved impossible. Each alien species had different military traditions that could not work together effectively. Their response times were measured in months rather than the hours that humans had achieved. Most damaging of all, they lacked humanity's crucial advantage, the willingness to take casualties to protect strangers. On Luna, retired General Carlos Rodriguez watched the reports from his quiet home overlooking Earth's gray surface. He had spent 40 years in galactic service before the withdrawal, and he understood better than most what the aliens had lost. Human soldiers had died for people they had never met on worlds whose names they could not pronounce. The aliens had called it primitive, but Rodriguez knew it was honor. The breaking point came when the research station at Arcturus Prime stopped responding to all communications. The facility housed 50,000 civilians from 12 different species, including families with children and the galaxy's most advanced medical researchers. When automated distress beacons activated, they sent signals in all directions across space. President Helen Carter received the emergency transmission in her office overlooking New Geneva. She was the same woman who had supported humanity's withdrawal from galactic affairs, but now she faced an impossible choice. She could maintain humanity's principled stance and let innocent people die, or she could break the withdrawal and save lives that only humans had the power to protect. Intelligence reports about Arcturus Prime made the situation even worse. Massive slaver fleet had surrounded the station and was systematically capturing every person aboard. The aliens trapped inside were not soldiers or politicians who had voted against humanity. They were researchers working to cure diseases, families trying to build better lives, and children who had done nothing wrong except being born in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carter walked to her window and looked out at Earth's blue oceans. Somewhere out there in the darkness of space, innocent people were dying because humanity was no longer allowed to protect them. The irony was bitter. The same aliens who had criticized human violence were now being destroyed because that violence was no longer available to defend them. She made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Carter called Admiral Patterson and asked how long it would take to reach Arcturus Prime with a fast response fleet. Patterson told her 14 hours with their best ships, but he reminded her that standing orders prohibited any military intervention in galactic affairs. Carter's voice carried the weight of moral certainty as she changed those orders. Humanity had not withdrawn from galactic affairs to let genocide happen while they had the power to stop it. They had withdrawn because they were tired of being treated like monsters for doing the right thing. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what monsters actually looked like. The message went out immediately to human military bases across Earth's solar system. Operation Redemption was authorized, and Admiral Patterson's fast response fleet began preparing for immediate departure. These were not the careful, measured responses that the Galactic Council preferred. This was human warfare at its most direct. Find the enemy, destroy the enemy, save the innocent. As news of the human response spread, reactions varied across the galaxy. Some alien governments privately celebrated, hoping that human intervention would end the chaos that had consumed their regions. Others worried about what humanity's return might mean for their own authority and independence. The Zolonian government sent a secret message to President Carter, formally requesting human assistance in protecting their outer colonies. The same species that had voted to limit human military actions was now begging for help. The hegemony followed with their own request, offering to pay any price for human protection of their trade routes. But Carter's response was swift and clear. Humanity would act to save innocent lives at Arcturus Prime because it was the right thing to do, not because alien governments finally realized they needed human help. The days of humans serving under alien oversight and criticism were over forever. Dr. Maria Santos, now working at a human research facility on Mars, watched the news broadcasts with mixed emotions. She had spent years developing medical treatments that saved alien lives, only to have her work dismissed as too aggressive by alien medical authorities. Now those same authorities were dying because they had rejected the protection that human aggression provided. The human fleet launched from Earth orbit with a precision and speed that had once been commonplace, but now seemed miraculous to alien observers. 14 hours to travel across half the galaxy, coordinate a complex rescue operation, and engage what intelligence estimated was the largest criminal fleet in recorded history. It was exactly the kind of impossible mission that humans had been performing for decades while aliens complained about their methods. As Admiral Patterson's ships entered hyperspace, The galaxy held its breath. Everyone understood that something fundamental was about to change. Humanity was returning to galactic affairs, but not as the criticized servants they had been before. They were coming back as an independent force that would operate by their own rules and their own moral code. 3 months had passed since Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. At first, the aliens thought it was all just talk. They expected humans to calm down and return to work within a few weeks. They were wrong. The human exodus was real, and it was happening everywhere. Admiral Roy Patterson stood on the bridge of his ship, the Liberty, watching the last human transport leave Kepler Station. The massive space station had been humanity's main military base for 30 years. Now it looked empty and dark as alien workers tried to figure out how to run it without humans. Below them, the station that once hummed with human activity was being handed over to a team of Zolonians and hegemony administrators. They had manuals and training videos, but they had never actually run a military operation of this size. Admiral Patterson felt a mix of sadness and satisfaction as he watched them struggle with systems that humans had operated smoothly for decades. Commander Katie Brooks approached the Admiral with a stack of message tablets. Her face was grim as she reported that 17 different Council worlds had sent urgent requests for military help. Pirates were attacking trade routes. Border wars were starting up again. 3 whole star systems had gone completely silent, which usually meant slavers had moved in. Admiral Patterson nodded but did not change his orders. The withdrawal was complete and final. No human ship would respond to alien distress calls. No human soldier would fight alien wars. The galaxy had made it clear they did not want human help, so they would not get it. On the planet below the station, Director Neil Foster was overseeing the evacuation of the Human Research Institute. The facility had been the galaxy's most important center for alien medicine and biology. Human scientists there had found cures for 7 different alien plagues and had revolutionized medical treatment across 40 species. Dr. Maria Santos, the chief scientist, felt guilty as she packed her research equipment. Years of work that could save millions of alien lives was being loaded onto human ships. She suggested to Foster that maybe some humans could stay and continue the medical work as independent researchers. Foster shook his head firmly. The Council had made their position clear when they voted to limit human activities. They did not trust human judgment or human methods. If they wanted to figure out viral mutations and genetic diseases on their own, that was their choice. i.e., humans would take their knowledge and expertise back to Earth where it was appreciated. Meanwhile, in the outer regions of the galaxy, the effects of human withdrawal were already becoming catastrophic. The mining colony on Delphi 7 sent increasingly desperate messages as raider attacks grew worse each day. For over 10 years, human patrol ships had kept the area safe. Now there were no protectors left, and the criminals knew it. Captain Ben Torres commanded a cargo ship called New Horizons. His crew was made up of former military personnel who had served in the outer systems. They listened to the distress calls from Delphi 7th with growing anger and frustration. They could reach the attacked colony in 18 hours, but their orders from Earth were absolutely clear. No military action, no matter how bad things got. Lieutenant Amy Walsh, Torres' second-in-command, approached him with barely controlled rage. She told him that civilians were being killed down there. Families with children were being murdered by raiders who knew no help was coming. She begged Torres to ignore orders and go help them. Torres felt the same anger and pain that Walsh did, but he held firm. He reminded her that they were not the galaxy's police force anymore. The Council had wanted to handle things their own way without human interference. Now they could learn what that really meant. The reality of human withdrawal hit different species in different ways. The Zolonians, who had been among the loudest critics of human military methods, suddenly found their outer colonies under constant attack. Raiders, who had been afraid to enter Zolonian space for decades, now struck with impunity. The same brutal, human tactics they had complained about had been the only thing keeping their people safe. The hegemony discovered that their slow, careful diplomatic approach to piracy was completely useless. While they spent weeks debating the proper response to attacks on their trade ships, entire merchant fleets were being captured and sold into slavery. The human method of immediate and overwhelming retaliation had worked because criminals understood only one language: force. Even worse, intelligence reports suggested that major criminal organizations were coordinating their activities for the first time in galactic history. With human rapid response forces gone, slavers and pirates were planning something they called the Great Harvest. They intended to sweep through system after system, taking everything of value and everyone they could sell. The aliens tried to organize their own joint military response, but it was a disaster from the beginning. Their different military philosophies could not work together. Zilonian forces moved too slowly. Hegemony ships were too few. The smaller species had no real military at all. Where human forces had been able to respond to threats within hours, the new alien coalition needed months just to agree on basic strategy. Most importantly, the aliens lacked something that had made human forces so effective: the willingness to sacrifice for strangers. Human soldiers had died protecting people they had never met on worlds they could not even pronounce. They fought because it was right, not because it benefited their own species. The aliens fought to protect their own interests, but they would not risk their lives for others. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter watched reports of the growing chaos with mixed feelings. She had supported the withdrawal because she was tired of seeing human lives wasted protecting ungrateful aliens, but she also felt sick watching innocent people suffer because human protectors were no longer there. The breaking point came when Arcturus Prime went silent. The research station housed 50,000 civilians from 12 different species, including some of the galaxy's most important medical researchers. When the station's emergency beacon activated, the distress signal reached human space first. President Carter stared at the message on her desk. These were not soldiers or politicians who had voted against humanity. These were innocent families, scientists, and children who had done nothing wrong. They were going to die because humans were no longer allowed to protect them. She called Admiral Patterson and asked how long it would take to reach Arcturus Prime with a rescue fleet. Patterson told her 14 hours with their fastest ships, but he reminded her that their orders were to stay out of galactic affairs completely. Carter made a decision that would change everything. She told Patterson that she was changing those orders. Humanity had not withdrawn from galactic affairs to let innocent people be massacred. They had withdrawn because they were tired of being treated like monsters for doing the right thing. She looked out her window at Earth's blue oceans and green continents. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what real monsters looked like. Maybe it was time to demonstrate the difference between human protection and human wrath. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with voices from dozens of different worlds. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat at the curved table made of smooth blue stone, his tired face showing no emotion as the tall gray alien spoke. The Zilonian delegate named Krixtal was talking again about humans being too violent and too simple in how they solved problems. Jake had heard this speech many times before. The aliens always said the same things. Humans were too quick to fight. Humans did not understand the delicate way of diplomacy. Humans were like wild animals that could not be trusted with important decisions. The words stung because Jake knew they were not true, but he had learned to stay quiet and listen. Today they were arguing about the Outer Rim War that had finally ended 6 months ago. 3 star systems had been fighting each other for 12 long years. Millions of people had died. Cities had burned. Children had starved. The Galactic Council had sent diplomats and negotiators and peacemakers, but nothing worked. The fighting went on and on. Then the Council asked humans to help. Captain Lisa Chen and her soldiers went to those dying worlds. They worked day and night, talking to angry warlords and protecting scared families. They brought food to hungry people and medicine to the wounded. When words failed, they fought to protect the innocent. In 6 months, the war was over. Peace came to those 3 systems for the first time in over a decade. But instead of saying thank you, the aliens criticized everything the humans had done. They said humans used too much force. They said humans did not respect the local customs. They said humans were lucky that their simple methods worked at all. Lisa sat in the visitor section watching the debate. She remembered the sleepless nights on those war-torn planets. She remembered holding dying children in her arms while enemy forces shot at the medical camps. She remembered her soldiers crying after they had to kill young fighters who were barely more than children themselves. The aliens called it simple and crude, but Lisa knew the truth. Every decision had been carefully planned. Every battle had been fought to save lives, not take them. The breaking point came when Counselor Vexithera stood up. She was from the Hegemony, one of the oldest and most powerful alien governments. Her voice filled the hall as she read from a formal document. She proposed something called Resolution 847C. The resolution would limit what humans could do in space. It would require aliens to watch over every human military action. It would make human soldiers take orders only from alien commanders. It would treat humans like dangerous pets that needed constant supervision. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked around the hall and saw alien faces nodding in agreement. These were the same aliens whose worlds humans had died to protect. These were the species that called for human help whenever pirates attacked their trade ships or when disasters struck their colonies. But they did not trust humans to make their own choices. Jake stood up slowly. His chair made a scraping sound against the polished floor. The huge hall became quiet. Even the humming translation devices seemed to pause. When Jake spoke, his voice carried the weight of 37 years of human service to the galaxy. He told them how humans had served faithfully for nearly 4 decades. He reminded them of the human blood spilled on alien worlds, protecting people who did not even want their help. He spoke of human engineers who built homes for refugee families and human doctors who cured alien diseases that their own scientists could not understand. He talked about human soldiers who died far from Earth, fighting for the freedom of strangers. Jake picked up his data tablets from the table. The simple action felt final, like closing a door that would never open again. He told the council that humanity was withdrawing from all military operations immediately. He said they could handle galactic security without human interference if that was what they wanted. His words were calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. As Jake walked toward the exit, Lisa and the other humans in the hall stood and followed him. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Alien delegates watched in shock. Many thought this was just another human trick to get better treatment. They expected the humans to come back in a few days with new demands. They were completely wrong. Jake Morrison had been a diplomat for most of his adult life. He had spent decades trying to build bridges between humans and aliens. He had believed that understanding and cooperation could solve any problem. But sitting in that hall, listening to species he had helped criticize and limit the very people who protected them, something broke inside him. Outside the council building, Lisa caught up with Jake. The alien city of Nexus Prime stretched out around them, its crystal towers reaching toward the purple sky. Alien vehicles hummed overhead and strange creatures walked the streets. For decades, humans had been part of this galactic community. Now, they were leaving it behind. Lisa asked Jake if he really meant what he said about withdrawing completely. Jake looked at the council building one last time. Through the transparent walls, he could see the aliens still debating. They probably thought the humans were being dramatic and would return soon with apologies. Jake told Lisa that he had never been more serious about anything in his life. He said humans had spent too many years trying to prove they belonged in galactic civilization. They had died for alien causes and built alien worlds and solved alien problems. In return, they got constant criticism and suspicion. The message went out that night to every human military base and research station across the galaxy. The order was simple: pack everything, shut down operations, and come home. The great human experiment in galactic cooperation was over. From now on, humanity would take care of its own interests first. The aliens would soon learn what they had lost.